So, for my second weekend in forced quarantine due to the Kung Flu virus of 2020, I decided that I was bored enough to watch an old black and white movie on MeTV. And I'm actually kind of glad that I did. So, this is actually a video movie review for the 1944 movie Mr. Skeffington, which I highly recommend that you watch. Okay? Now, aside from the fact that it's 1944, and well, this is an aside. It's 1944, and at the end of the movie, even though it's 1944, Mr. Skeffington returns to America after having been in a German concentration camp. That tells me that in 1944, Hollywood was fully cognizant of the fact that the Nazis were putting Jews in concentration camps. And that's documented proof that Hollywood can't run from today. But that's another story. Maybe for another time. The movie is mostly about Mr. Skeffington and a woman named Frances, and their life together and love for one another. She's the typical woman about town who is interesting and appealing for no other fact than the fact that she was born a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. Okay, I guess she's rich. She's from a prominent family, but she actually doesn't have any money at the beginning of the movie because a relative of hers, I think it's her brother, has actually swindled Mr. Skeffington, among other people, and taken their money and lost it all gambling at the racetrack, which is actually pretty funny. So she just gives the illusion that she's rich, and she has at least 10 different men during the course of the movie who are absolutely crazy about her for no other reason other than that she's hot and she's rich. She's achieved nothing. She's not attractive personality. She has no talents. She is not educated. She doesn't cook, clean, play an instrument. She doesn't even play Chutes and Ladders. She basically spends all of her time looking pretty and fastidiously making herself up. At one point in the early part of the movie, she makes a comment to her brother, the good one, not the swindler, the good one, about how she spent an hour on her curls, and he criticizes her for doing so, and she says, well, wasn't it worth it? And he said, yeah, I guess so. This is her brother, of course, who has no actual relationship interest in her in terms of the type of relationship the rest of the suitors have. So then she becomes the quintessential crappy woman who picks the suitor not for love, but for his money. So she goes after and allows, actually she's the one who initiates any kind of contact with Mr. Skeffington in an attempt to get Mr. Skeffington on their side to expunge the family debts and then to benefit from his wealth because he's a very wealthy person. So Franny's played by Betty Davis, and Mr. Skeffington is played by Claude Rains. And I had initially a lot of trouble watching this because every other movie from this era I've ever seen Claude Rains in, he plays a villain. Like he's Prince John in Robin Hood. But it was it was interesting because he sort of looks like a villain, but she's the real villain because she doesn't love him. He actually does care about her. He seems to enjoy her company. And he says something at this point that is actually the linchpin of this movie. He says, a woman is only beautiful when she is loved. Okay? So skip to the end. It's the typical shallow, superficial relationship that falls apart. She is continually bombarded with suitors because of her looks. He's distracted because of the war and his business and the money and all of that. She entertains the attention of other men even though she's married, which leads then her to deny him of the attention. So he goes after the attention of other women. And of course, it's his fault that she denied him affection and he went after attention from other people. And she takes half of his stuff. It's interesting how old this movie is because this could have been made today and it would have fit in with everything except for the Jewry relationship. Okay? The fact that Skeffington is a Jew. Other than that, everything else is exactly what we're seeing today. So it's interesting that this played out in the 40s and nobody seems to know it. So She creates a situation. He strays. She blames him. And the courts take half of his stuff away. And he moves away. And they've had a kid. And he's now alienated. Actually, I guess the kid is alienated from both of them. And then Franny catches diphtheria. And it strips her of her looks. And she ages and becomes the age she actually is. She insists that she is still beautiful, goes to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist says, "You're a 50-year-old woman. You should go back to your husband, because the only man who's going to think that you're attractive is the man who married you and is faithful to you. So go back to him." And she's like, "He's in Europe. Then call him back here." "Well, he would never have me, and I have all these other men lined up." And so the psychiatrist tells her, "Fine, invite them all over and prove it to yourself." And they come, and they are initially super excited because they think there's an opportunity, and then they see her. And the actors in this movie play it very well because she hasn't actually gotten any worse. It's all makeup. But their behavior shows they are shocked and disinterested. There's one guy, and I can't remember the names because I've never seen this movie before, and I wish I had. There's one guy, and he has sort of a very plain Jane, frumpy wife. And she makes a comment after they part company, although she's still in the house, and says, "It's a shame. She used to be so beautiful," which is funny because this plain 5 is now more attractive than the woman who used to be the belle of the ball, the talk of the town. And she's fallen to the bottom, and she finally realizes that she can't get anyone that she wants. And then there's one simp, blue pill dude who shows up, and he's going to marry her no matter what, even though he's also visually turned off until he learns she has no money. And then he walks out the door too. But Franny is still too arrogant and too proud to go back to the husband. And somebody, I think it's the maid, reminds her that the master, her husband, Mr. Skeffington, I don't even know what his first name was, had said that a woman is only beautiful if she is loved. And that it's a shame because that's the only man who ever actually really loved her. And he shows up back at the house, not because she's invited him, actually because he has nowhere else to go. And you don't know this until they finally get together in the drawing room. But she goes down very reluctantly to meet him and see him because she doesn't really want anything to do with him. She still has this notion in her head that her poop doesn't stink and that she can get any man that she wants, even though she's penniless. Now, he's penniless too, because he went to Europe, the Nazis seized everything, threw him in a concentration camp, and he's been released somehow. I'm not sure how that happened in 1944, unless it's right at the end of 1944, after the 101st Airborne Division started liberating camps, which means he wasn't in like Bergen-Belsen or Dachau, or what's the famous one? I can't think of it. Auschwitz. That he must have just been in a normal work camp instead of an extermination camp. And she doesn't notice until he gets up to come and see her that he is blind. And at the end of the movie, we get the crux of the matter. He will always see her as beautiful because he has no idea what she looks like. And he wouldn't see her that way anyway because he actually loves her. And she finally says at the end of the movie, a woman is only beautiful if she is loved, and realizes that that is what makes her beautiful to him. That the psychiatrist was correct, that her husband was always right, that it is the love of a man that makes a woman beautiful and not her actual physical appearance. And here's why I know this to be a fact. In 2015 and 2016, I watched my friend's parents die. They were both in their mid-80s. And they had dementia shortly before they died, but up until that point, they actually really liked each other. And I don't think they saw each other as 80-year-olds. My parents are the same way. My parents are in their mid-60s, and they're, past Fran's age, and they're not at the peak of their physical appearance and appeal. But I think that because my parents actually love each other, they don't see each other as 65-year-olds. They still see the person that they love. That if you actually love someone, they don't age for you. In the movie Shakespeare in Love, he says that to Viola de Lesseps, that you will never age for me. And I think that that's what that comment is about, is that if you really love someone, you love them no matter what happens to them, no matter what time does to them, that you love them. You're not, just attracted to their body or their money or their title or their job. If you actually care about them, then it doesn't matter what happens to them and how they change. You will still love them, still be with them, still be faithful to them. But that's not what we see most of the time. And in this movie, he makes the comment that a woman is only beautiful when she is loved. And you can see that in our modern society. There are lots of women out there who believe themselves to be beautiful. Sometime last week, I posted a link to my Twitter feed about a porn actress, Playboy model, that's what she is. A Playboy model who is stuck in the quarantine and was inviting a man to come and play with her during the quarantine. Now, she doesn't want him long term. She's just bored and lonely. And she really isn't all that attractive, because this is not attractive to a good man. In fact, I'm not really sure why Mr. Skeffington liked Franny, because aside from the fact that back in the 40s they acted as if a woman's virtue was intact, it's actually probably pretty unlikely that she was just hanging out with those guys and that she wasn't doing the horizontal mambo with them, which to a good man, a man of means and value like Mr. Skeffington, he would have wanted nothing to do with her. As opposed to Mr. Darcy, who was interested in, I can't remember what her name is, because her virtue was intact and she was an interesting person, because she eschewed all male company, ergo she was still virtuous and therefore appealing to him in some degree as a mate. If she had been like one of the other sisters, what's the female version of philanderer? Whore, I guess. If she'd been a whore, then he wouldn't have been interested in her like he wasn't interested in any of her sisters, regardless of their behavior or their looks. Because I guess she was actually pretty plain Jane, which might be where that phrase comes from, plain Jane Austen. I don't know. Food for thought. Anyway, I'm just rambling here. So, Mr. Skeffington likes her. He's the only one who actually likes her. Everyone else just wants to be with her because she's beautiful and they want to have the greatest arm candy. And at the end of the movie, he still wants her. Now, he doesn't see her as she is because he can't see. And that would have been an interesting think piece for if he had been able to see. But because he was blind, she was able to be convinced that she would always be beautiful to him because he would remember her as she was before the diphtheria struck, before she was 50, probably before she was 40, or even before she was 30. I don't know how long they were estranged, because their daughter was old enough she was marrying. So it could have been as many as 20 years, which means the last time he saw her, she might have been 30. And she would have been frozen in time in his memory looking that way. And he would not have noticed or been put off by whatever the diphtheria did. Okay? So he has this sort of, get out of jail free card that most men don't have. But that's the real thing here, is that this is where everything comes together. So I've said other things like, if your personality is a 3 and your looks are an 8, you're a 3. Because a man loves a woman not just because of her looks. Now, looks may get a man's attention, but they will not keep it, and they will not necessarily get a good man to commit to you. You also have to be of good character. Okay? The same is probably true of a good woman, that regardless of your looks, if you're not a man of good character, they won't want to keep you either. But the real thing here is that's how that plays out. Her beauty goes away, guaranteed, unless she finds a man who loves her. And if she can find a man who loves her, she will never fade, and she will always be beautiful to that man. Watch the movie, listen to the psychiatrist, because he's right on. Go back to your husband at your age, at your circumstance. That is the only kind of man who will actually really give a flying pinwheel about you, is a man who married you and is committed to the relationship with you. In other words, he's the only real shot you have, which is interesting in our time with the Me Too and the women's lib and the feminism and women are equal to men and you can have a career and then when you've done that, you can have kids. You can't have kids when you're 50. probably. And you can't probably have healthy kids when you're 50. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. And if you want to be and remain beautiful, then you need to find a man who will love you. Not who's turned on by you, not who wants to show you off to his friends, but a man who actually loves you, which means you need to be the kind of woman a man will love. And yes, men love to look at pretty women. But if that's all that men wanted, then they would just fill their walls. I guess it's over here. They would just put posters of pretty women up there. And it wouldn't matter who you were, because those will always be beautiful. Because they will never fade. But your beauty, your physical appearance goes away. Everybody's does. Men do too, eventually. I don't care who they are. Eventually, every man, looks like an old, decrepit ape. And if you want to be beautiful, if you want to have someone, you need to find a man. You need to get a man to love you because you're a person worthy of being loved. Because you're a covenant woman. Because you're a good woman. Because you're a partner for the man. And then it doesn't matter if you weren't an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 when you met. Because you're not going to stay an 8 or 9 out of 10 after 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I have neighbors down the street. They're in their early 70s. And I could tell from talking to the woman that she loves her husband. And I'm sure that he also looks old. He also has dementia. And I feel bad for them. But she loves him. And she is hoping to spend quality time with him while he still remembers her. And I think she's lucky, and she knows it, that he actually loves her, regardless of the fact that she's in her 70s. That they actually care about one another. That it wasn't just, ooh, she's hot. So here's the nitty-gritty of how do you tell? Ask him, why do you love me? Why are you with me? And if it isn't something about who you are, they don't love you. This is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. I was asked by a girl I dated once a couple of years back. We only went out like twice, and after 10 days, I could tell she was untenable company. But she asked me this interesting question. She said, did you love your ex-wife? And I said, no, I didn't. And she was a little bit shocked. I thought I did at the time. But I know now that I didn't. I also know that she never loved me. Which is probably why I don't care. And I don't consider her beautiful, and I don't have any interest in getting back together with her, is because I never loved her in the first place. If a woman wants to be beautiful, she needs to be loved by a man. Interesting thought. 1940s, Claude Rains, black and white movie. Go watch it for yourself. You can probably watch it for free on MeTV, and you got nothing better to do during the quarantine, right? But it was an interesting movie in many ways, and relevant to the current time and the current attitudes between men and women. Something to think about what are you actually looking for? Are you the type of person that people will love, that people want to love? Or are you the type of person that is only capable of being loved by yourself? There are people out there who are very difficult to love. And if you are making it difficult for someone to love you, whether you're a man or a woman, you will never be beautiful, and you will probably be miserable. This is a difficult time, and they're going to continue to become difficult times. It's not going to get better. It's just going to be different. And so if you're not happy with the way things are, become the kind of person that someone will love. Watch the movie, 1944, Mr. Skeffington. I'm just going to put this up and I'll put it in the bottom here. May 25th, 1944. So it wasn't even after any of the camps were liberated. That's phenomenal. But a woman is beautiful only when she is loved. George tells Fanny at that moment she has never been more beautiful. Because Mr. Skeffington is there, and Mr. Skeffington loves her. It's amazing. Oh, his first name is Job. It's interesting to see what happens to people. The fickle attention of her adoring suitors goes away with her looks or her money, all of a sudden she has no one interested in her. And I think the same thing happens to men. If you lose your looks or your money, all of a sudden, whatever women might have been pursuing you will go away too. But if you're looking for someone worth keeping, find somebody who loves you for you. One last comment, and then I'll turn you loose. I think once a couple of years ago, I had a woman who actually loved me for me. I don't know exactly what happened. I have my suspicions. And I often ask myself what I would do if I saw her again. I don't know. I can say this, though. Regardless of the way she looks, if her personality and her behavior has become something I don't want to keep, then that's what will actually make the difference. I'm not as good looking as I was 7 years ago. She probably isn't either. I haven't changed who I am, what I do, how I am, what I believe. If she has become a different person, then that's what would actually make her unattractive to me. In this movie, that was the deal. Mr. Skeffington always loved Franny, even though she was basically a woman I would have never paid any attention to. She finally realized that he was a man worth loving. Neither one of them changed, except for she finally does a little bit, so it looks like at the end, when she decides to let his love apply. What really matters is how a person is, not how they look. So if you're single and you're not looking for somebody who's of good moral character, then you're looking for the wrong things. And I have dated the last two girls I went out with. I guess I didn't really date them. I went out with them for a couple of weeks. They were pretty, but they were not good company, and they didn't treat me well. And I think they were both totally shocked. I don't think they'd ever been dumped before because they're pretty. But they weren't girls I wanted to keep. I've actually only known one woman I wanted to keep, and she didn't want me. Sort of like Franny, except for, we'll see. Hopefully she doesn't have to go blind to see that. And if I don't see her again, it's okay. I know this now. I wish I'd seen this movie beforehand. I don't know if I would have understood it until now, but I do now. And I highly recommend it to you because it will give you a little bit of perspective. It's a slow-moving movie, but it is definitely appropriate to our circumstances today. And I recommend it, especially given how old it is, which means this is not a new thing, and we're just back to that same point in the cycle where it matters. As you enjoy your quarantine, good luck. Find some memorable entertainment and make some memories and either do something worth writing or write something worth reading or viewing in this case. I just thought this would be easier than writing it down. Anyway, have a great day. Godspeed, good luck, and it's time to go paint my kitchen.